Morning everyone, so thanks for coming along. So in terms of introductions, my name's Giles Davies. I work in the Visual Studio team in the UK as a technical specialist. I don't know whether this counts as most intriguing or most odd or whatever session of the event, but just wanted to talk about really Microsoft and the relevance in the Java space and to cover off some themes around that, and that's really what I want to run through. I'll obviously expand on this a little bit, but if you take away any one thing from this, then the thing I'd like you to take away, apart from some stickers, which I've got as well, I'll hand those out, is that Microsoft has changed. There's been some fundamental and deep changes in Microsoft over the last few years. I'll obviously expand on how this is relevant in this space, but essentially what that boils down to is it's not a Microsoft stack only approach. It's not that you must be running on the full Microsoft stack in any way, and what we want to do is support really anyone running anything pretty much. In terms of, well, what does that look like? Some famous images. This is Satya Nadella, our new CEO. He's been in place a couple of years. Very, very well-known picture, but Microsoft loves Linux. The reference to that really is around Azure, which I'll talk about in a bit, our cloud platform, and the fact that you can not only run Windows images and servers and so on in Azure, but you can also run Linux-based machines. And in fact, the range of distribution of distros that is up there has been increasing. So you can choose which Linux distro you want to have. But I think sort of a key factlet around that is that we've got, in fact, slightly over 25% of our compute time in Azure is running on Linux. So it's a very significant proportion of our Azure consumption, if you like, is driven by Linux. And that's not really been as a result of a push. It's just been that's what we're picking up, and that's what our users are choosing to deploy into the cloud. So that's very significant for us, in terms of a proportion. Another interesting one, oops, sorry, I had a step on those, was that slightly more recently is the one of the big sort of stumbling blocks, if you like, was the relationship with Red Hat in particular. So we had a lot of the other distributions, but in fact we've also, I think that's really down to Satya and the change in the approach within Microsoft, have now got Red Hat as a full-scale partner as well. And in fact that's more significant than just can we run up a Red Hat Enterprise Linux VM in Azure. This is a proper partnership. We have co-hosted support teams that physically work together. It's a deep relationship that's been established there. Another thing, and I'll come back to this a little bit, not really what I want to talk about today particularly, but just out of your interest, I'll come back to .Net being open sourced and cross-platform as well, but Red Hat is also going to be, or is the reference distribution for .Net cross-platform as well. So there's another tie up there in that aspect. Another one which is fairly recent, so back in March, but another pretty interesting one, is SQL Server will also be coming out on Linux. So again, some sort of big stones being overturned within the sort of Microsoft architecture and tools families. Another even more recent one at the latest Build conference is the Bash shell coming to Windows as well. So this is canonical and giving you a full Bash shell within Windows. So not only the command line, but the ability to run Linux binaries, etc., within Windows. And so those, I think, are just some examples of some pretty significant shifts around the thinking within Microsoft and how do we want to work with people. And I think that really is, I would sum it up as we just want to work with what you want to work with. So if there are particular tools or platforms or technologies, then great. You should carry on using them. And what we want to do is help you use them within the context of things like Azure. How does that flow down into areas that the area I sit in, which is around dev tools? Again, I'm not going to be talking about .NET today, but just so you're aware, I think these are also fundamental changes at a cultural level. .NET itself has been open sourced, so .NET is on GitHub. And .NET has been, and we welcome and would encourage contributions to that. So that's part of the reason that's been open sourced is we want community contribution. There are things that we have a lot of engineers, but there are things that they won't be doing from time. There are always time pressures and finite resources. So if you can contribute and improve that, that's great. So please feel free to do that. We've also split out .NET into effectively a superset and a subset. The subset, .NET Core, is not only open source but cross-platform as well. and so you can run that on Windows, Mac, Linux, and so you can develop an ASP.NET C# application on the Mac and deploy it to a Linux VM, for example. All of that is possible today. So some big changes there as well. Hand in hand with that, I think to some extent, we've also been bringing out new tools. So Visual Studio Code is a new member of the Visual Studio family. It's not the same architecture. This is Atom or Electron based, with our Monaco editor embedded within that. And it's a free, open source, cross-platform editor that supports not just our own languages, but certainly Java, JavaScript, Ruby, Groovy, Markdown, whatever. There's about 40 languages it supports out of the box, and you can extend those, and there's a whole range of extensions for it that cover, I think, over 100 other languages. And so I think that's part of, let's bring you, if we're going to support an open ecosystem, let's also give you the tools from us as well to help if you want to use those. And let's have the tools that will support those and travel with them. Some other areas you may or may not be aware, but we've been working one way or another with Eclipse to some extent for a little while, but we formally joined Eclipse as a member of the Eclipse Foundation, and so that should lead to some interesting stuff in the future as well. But we're formally part of that community now, and we've also got integrations into IntelliJ as well. And all of the work we do, that both for Eclipse and IntelliJ, we open source as well. So you'll see not just the examples I've given you, but there's a huge amount of Microsoft stuff on GitHub now. And that tends to be a model where we want to make that available. You can see it, contribute back to it, and a lot of our teams are directly contributing to GitHub for that reason. Another example, and I'll show you this in a bit. So today there's some slides I'm going to go through here, and I want to show you some stuff. So I'm going to take you through some of the tooling and how we can support some of this. But one of the things I will show you anyway, is our sort of cross-platform build and release agent. And so a story of the changing times from me. I think I joined Microsoft about 7 years ago. I actually came from a Java background, so I came from Rational, in fact, at the time, into Microsoft. But when I joined, the build agents were Windows only. And when we had pushback from customers, and I talked to the product group, the answer was that we must only produce Windows agents. We must not produce for other platforms, because the job is to support Windows. And so just as fast forward a bit to the last sort of year or two, I guess, when we got a brand new build system, which I'll show you, but that came immediately with cross-platform build agents. And I think for me, that's a tiny, tiny bit of Microsoft. For me, that sort of exemplifies the change in culture, that of course we'd make it cross-platform. Why wouldn't we? And there's been quite a deep change there. But we'll see a little bit more of that later on. So a big area I want to talk about is Azure at this stage. And so I'll put this into there are two areas I want to cover, really. And I think Azure falls into okay, I'm a Java developer. What can Microsoft offer in terms of the platform that I deploy to? And that's really the context that I'd put Azure in, that it's the cloud platform that we can deploy our stuff to. And the second one I want to talk about is how do we support you as a developer with developer tools and services. So I guess the key point here really is that Azure is very much an open cloud. I'm not going to go through all of these, you'll be pleased to know. But these are all examples of organizations that we partnered with in some form or other to make sure that technology works well in the cloud. And so this is, I don't know, if you take examples like Tomcat or Jetty or something, this is again, if we take that sort of approach of we'd like to support you using the tools and frameworks and platforms and technologies that you want to use, and let's make sure that those work well in our platform, in Azure in this example. So wherever you are in each of those, maybe I want to use Jenkins as the build agent, or as the build system, sorry. Then we've worked with those guys to make sure that it works well inside Azure. Maybe we have actually adopted these in later versions of .NET as well, but if I want to use task managers and things like Grunt and Gradle and those kind of things. Let's use them. How do I deploy? Maybe I'm using something like Chef. Again, let's have all these tools in there. So there's a wide range of things that we can use. Maybe you want to use other technologies, Oracle, IBM tools, WebSphere, those kind of technologies. And again, let's make sure they work in our platform. So it's not can we provide the Microsoft equivalent? Yes, absolutely. Are we forcing you to use it? Absolutely not. Use the one that makes sense for you, the ones that you're comfortable using for whatever reason. There are a range of Azure SDKs. If you Google with Bing for something like Azure SDKs, then you'll find a range of languages and technologies supported. Amongst those is Java. So there are others like Ruby and PHP and mobile and Windows, of course. But there's a whole range that are in there. Specifically for Java developers, what we're looking at there is Azure is providing a whole range of services, from virtual machines to back-end, big data. There's a whole range of services available in the cloud. And what we want to do is to make those available to Java developers by providing Java SDKs, both the APIs that allow you to work using Java to actually get stuff done, but also to hook into the tooling that you're familiar with as well. So again, things like Eclipse integration, IntelliJ integration, and that sort of thing. So use the tools you're familiar with and use the language you're familiar with, but to access some of these services. And what the Azure platform provides really is essentially two computing models. So you've got the infrastructure as a service, which is virtual machine based. So I want to create virtual machines, and then the classic model, I am responsible then for the virtual machine itself, its own configuration, update, whatever's running inside it. Versus platform as a service, PaaS, which is where the virtual machine is not your responsibility. What you're providing is the cloud service, and it's just your application code and data, and the actual service itself is provided by the cloud infrastructure. And both of those models are supported. And so as an example, and I'll show you this briefly in a minute, is if I was using infrastructure as a service, let's take Tomcat as the example today, is that what I want to do is deploy, I want to have a Tomcat instance. I could choose to have that as a virtual machine that is running under my control inside the cloud, inside Azure. Or I can have Tomcat running as a service, and I don't care about or have any responsibility for the underlying virtual machine. So you can choose the model that suits you. And there are various capabilities within those. But essentially that move to PaaS, to platform as a service, is about just losing yet more responsibility. Moving to infrastructure as a service, I don't worry about the tin, the storage, the networking, all that's provided by my cloud provider. When you move to PaaS, don't worry about the virtual machine. That's not your responsibility. That moves away. And this extends into things like Azure mobile services. If we look at this, we've got a number of SDKs that support different platforms, whether that might be using technologies like Cordova, PhoneGap, those kind of things. We've recently acquired Xamarin, which is C# based cross-platform mobile app development. So whatever HTML5, whatever your front end might be, we provide a load of REST API backed integration into mobile services in the cloud. So where do I put my data in my mobile application? And again, not just using ours, but there's a range of choices. So maybe we'll use Azure SQL or Azure Table Storage or Blob Storage, but we also support things like MongoDB. So all of that information, all those types are there. How am I going to do user authentication? All the key ones are in there. And how do I get notifications pushed out to my mobile users? And Azure provides all of the integration into the key push notification mechanisms as well. So there's a wide range of support. Takes away a lot of that effort for you that maybe some of my users are on iOS, some are on Android. How do I push out to a subset of those users this message? And we'll just integrate into those notification centers for you. I mentioned already that how do we sort of bring this to you, if you like? Well, I think that's through, again, let's not make you learn or pick up different tools. This isn't about, I'm not assimilating you into, at the end of this session, you will need to go out and get Visual Studio. what we're saying is that actually if you are today using Eclipse, for example, then carry on using Eclipse. What we'll do is provide the right integrations and tools, and let's use that as the platform, for example. So we'll use those tools you're already wanting to use. And so with a word from our CEO at the end, but it's this point about we wanted to make sure that Azure is not just about Windows. It's an open platform. Use the technologies that you want to, and I'll show you a little bit of this in a second. So the second area I want to look at was, if you like, what I've just tried to briefly cover off is Azure as the platform that you deploy to. I want to take a little bit of a look at as a Java developer, my development life cycle. How can we help support that, and what are we doing to support it? Perhaps take a slightly different view of the same information. So this is perhaps the view of the world that you might expect, which is that, so can Microsoft provide support throughout a development lifecycle? Yes, absolutely. And we can do that using a whole load of Microsoft tools. So you can use Visual Studio, Team Services. We've got our own build system. We've got our own release system. You can monitor that. We've got telemetry. You can use things like Application Insights, System Center, desired state configuration. There's a whole PowerShell, there's a whole range of tools that we own, effectively, that are our technologies that you can use. I have heard that there are people that don't use some Microsoft technologies out there, so crazy types. But but we recognise that there are those people out there, and there's a wide range. This obviously isn't comprehensive, but there's a wide range of other tools, not necessarily OSS, but things that aren't Microsoft. And again, I think the point I want to make here is actually we want to support both. So yes, of course, we want to provide all of the support that we can. So we want to provide an end-to-end lifecycle support. But actually, if you prefer to mix and match, or you don't want to use those tools at all, then that's fine as well. We'll use whichever combination is appropriate to you in sort of your unique setup. And where that primarily comes together, and what I'll show you in a bit more detail in a minute, we'll go through it, is something called Visual Studio Team Services. And Team Services is the back-end developer repository. And so what that's really providing is, and I'll take you through this in a bit more detail, but is how do I track my work? How do we put in support for things like Kanban and Scrum and those kind of approaches? How do we know what we're working on, who's working on it? Where do I put my source? And so another example of I think a change in Microsoft is Team Services supports Git, so you can have private Git repositories hosted in the cloud in Team Services. And I think as a quick aside, that's another example to me of how Microsoft has changed. So I think as distributed version control systems have been adopted, or are being adopted in the industry, I think if you'd rolled back a few years, Microsoft's response would have been fantastic. That means we need to produce Microsoft Distributed Version Control System Enterprise Plus 3.1 Premium or something. So we'll write it ourselves and put that out there. Instead, the approach was simply, well, what are people using? There are others, like Mercurial and things, obviously, but the industry leader is Git, so let's just adopt it. And not some Microsoft hokey proprietary version. Let's just go and get Git, and we will adopt it, and we will contribute back to the community as well. So anything that we do make changes to will be proper contributions. So Git is one of the options within source control in there. Let's have a build system so we can support CI. And an area of increasing interest around DevOps and continuous delivery, continuous deployment. Let's have that release capability as part of that, as well as things like testing and other things that are there. And I've just put a few logos around this because I wanted to emphasize that, again, actually the Visual Studio strategy now is we want to support any app or any application and any developer. So this is not any .NET developer and any .NET application, but any app and any developer. And that's really what's guiding all of the product strategy and features, if you like. And so for Team Services, that means does it matter that you're a .NET developer or Java developer or C++ developer or Ruby? No, it doesn't matter at all. There's no restrictions. We want to support all of those, and we want to have the appropriate sort of integrations into those. And again, I'll show you a little bit more of this in a minute, and I'll take you through what that looks like. Something else I want to talk about briefly is application insights and for Java. Essentially, Microsoft itself has been on a journey to the cloud. we've been moving from the sort of monolithic release every 2 or 3 years kind of major product release cycle into let's release much more frequently. So depending on the products, they'll have different cadences, but team services, for example, is released every 3 weeks. So we have a 3-week sprint, and every 3 weeks there's a new release of it. In areas of Azure, that can be much more rapid. There may be many releases per week of different services. But actually, we found that challenging overall as an organisation. How do you shift to that mindset? And there are many learning points along the way. The reason I'm talking about this is that one of those learning points was that understanding how people are using your products and tools is really, really important, and we didn't have enough telemetry around that. And that's really where application insights came from, which is that we want to know whether, we've just rolled out a new feature into the latest release. Do people use it? Does it work? We put a lot of effort into that. Nobody knows it's there, or they don't like it, or something. So we want to get a lot more telemetry back like that. Particularly where you're deploying to the cloud to potentially global user base. It's very hard to get that immediate feedback. So let's understand who's using it. Where, in the sense of what sort of devices and form factors and what unexpected exceptions are being thrown, and let's look at performance characteristics. So that's where application insights comes in. It's available across a range of technologies, and out of the box immediately it supported Java as well as .NET. And essentially it's just telemetry that allows you to capture information about your application, as long as your application can post that data back into the cloud. So if it's filed away, it won't work, but apart from that, it can send it back. And you don't need to change your code. It's just basically a token. And once we understand that we're looking at that application, we'll start to capture those metrics around it. So there's a range of things you can look at there. So what I want to do, that's sort of intros. What I wanted to do was sort of take you through a few of these bits. So I need to put my goggles on for this, so let's put those on. Where I thought I'd start is we started with, let's get rid of this guy. We started with Azure, so let's go and have a look at something in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Azure portal. Expand this a little bit. And I've got a number of accounts, and I'm going to go into this one. And what I thought I'd do is let's look at the first example I was giving you, which is, okay, I want to deploy somewhere, and we're going to use the cloud. And so what I'm looking at here is just the health. These are the current data centers in Azure around the world, and the health. You can dive into those, what services are available, and so on. They're being expanded quite rapidly. But what I want to do here is I'm going to say I want to create something new, but let's go and have an app service. And an app service, I've got some other ones in there, but an app service is one of those platform as a service services. So I'm not going to, in this instance, I'll show you this in a minute, but I'm not going to create a virtual machine. What I want to do is come in and say I'd like a new app service. And I'm going to call it, let's say, Evox UK. Let's see if that's unique. There we go, that's fine. And I want to create, we have a concept of a resource group. You can create a resource group holds a number of services. Basically, it's an easier way to manage them. So, in fact, for me, what's quite a good thing here would be, I can if I call that Evox UK resource group, I can manage everything that I would create inside that resource group. I can delete it, stop it, whatever I want to do. And where do I want it to be located? I'm happy with North Europe, which in the bizarre world of some American geography is Dublin, and West Europe is Amsterdam, but don't ask on that one. So we'll deal with that. There is a UK data centre opening up this year. I'm quite intrigued to see what that is, where that's referenced in terms of Europe. We've got North and West. So whether, yeah, absolutely. So exactly. so anyway, so I'm going to host this in Dublin actually, because it's North Europe on that one. And so I'm going to go ahead and say let's just go and create that. So it won't take very long. As I tend to find with these things, when you just go through and try this stuff out on your own, a minute or so doesn't seem too bad. Sometimes it might be a bit long looking at you. So I'm going to leave that to just deploy in the background. It probably won't take very long. But in the meantime, while I'm creating that, I'm going to come back and configure it, and I'll show you how we turn it into, what I'm going to do is turn it into a Tomcat service. While we're doing that, let's go in and say, well, maybe I didn't want to create platform as a service. Maybe I was interested in the sort of virtual machine route. And so if I came in and said, well, let's just type in Java into our marketplace, and these are the the pre-prepared, if you like, available images and resources that are sitting in Azure around whatever it is I've just typed in. There are thousands of things up there, and obviously you'd probably filter this down a bit. But what you can see here is there's a load of stuff. So, you know, there's the Java coffee shop, so an example, but you've got things like Wildfly, Tomcat, you know, there's several Tomcat implementations, WebSphere versions and editions. And I can keep loading these up. There's a load of stuff in there, and I can keep going through. I don't know how many there are in total, but there's a whole load of stuff. So I can say, what is it that I want? And some of these will be, you know, if we go back up, let's look at some of these. That Tomcat implementation supplied by Bitnami, that's actually going to be a virtual machine with Tomcat already installed that you can then go and run up. Others of these, so if we look at, say, web and mobile there, that Java coffee shop, that's something which is already provided as a service. There are different types of capabilities here. But you can go and choose whatever it is you want to look at. And let's narrow that down a bit and say, well, actually, I'm interested in, you know, just Tomcat. I'll check on my deployment while we're doing that. There we go, that's done. So we'll come back to that. Why are you not coming back? Let's try that guy again then. Right, Demo Guild's not with me on that particular one, doesn't matter too much, but I'll narrow that down. We can have a look at, say, just Tomcat or Wildfly or whatever it might be. So what I want to do is let's go into my app services, that one that's been created. So we've got our Evox UK app service. And what I'm going to do here is go into the application settings. And you'll see there are some general settings here. And in this case, I want it to be a Java service. So what I'm going to do, and here you can see that Java and Python are off. So what I'm going to do here is say I'd like it to be Java, choose a level, so it would be Java 8. And then I've got some lots of configuration tweaks. Which minor version do I want? I'm happy to take the newest minor version of Java in this example. But what web container do I want? And I can choose between some that are on there, Tomcat, Jetty, that kind of thing. I'll keep the default, so I'll go for Tomcat 8 that's sitting in there. That's absolutely fine. There are various other configuration options I can go through. None of those too important for the moment, but I can go and set those. When I'm happy with that, then I can save those changes. So updating those, that shouldn't take too long. Just wait for the confirmation. There we go, successfully updated. And then this is a public URL. Obviously, if you're doing this properly, you can redirect it. But devoxuk.azurewebsites.net. I've now got an empty container service which is configured for Tomcat. So I've now got my deployment target sitting in Azure. This is just doing first time compilation. So this is now sitting there. I can see that we've got the Catalina base is Tomcat 8023. And so this guy is now sitting there waiting for me to do something. So it's available for me, but I've now deployed a Tomcat service inside the cloud. So what might I want to do with that? Well, let's assume I'm going to be using Eclipse. So I've got the world's noddiest servlet implementation. I thought you wouldn't be too interested in watching me coding. So it's not, it doesn't do anything very exciting. But here we've got, let's change that. So let's just have the output. We're just going to say this is a simple servlet at Devox UK. There we go. So simple change. And what I'm going to do is just deploy this guy. Is I'm going to right-click, well, in fact, before I do that, let's go into the Azure Explorer, actually. So those Azure SDKs that I mentioned, and let me zoom in a little bit. You can see the Azure Explorer up here, if I just refresh this one, is part of the SDKs that I mentioned around Azure. And so this is providing access to the Azure portal that we're looking at, but from within Eclipse. So I can start to look at some of the stuff that I've got within here. So if I dive down into the web apps, we've just created that Devox UK service that we're looking at, and I can do things like start, stop it, go and open it up from here, that kind of thing. So I got access to that information from within Eclipse. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to come in. Let's come out of that for a second. Go back down here, not to that one, go into the Azure area. Let me zoom in again so you can see it slightly. You can see I've got some options there. Do I want to add that telemetry, application insights that I was talking about? Do I want to add that into this application? I can go through that if I want to. Do I want to publish this as an Azure web app? Do I want to publish it as a cloud service, for example? So let's go and deploy this as a cloud service, or if I wanted to have a look at that, let's just come out of here. Then I could go and import basically my credentials, pick up my access to Azure and start to choose that. But if we go back in and say, well, actually what I'd like to do is let's go and publish an Azure web app. Let me just zoom in again so you can see it. You can see that these are the available services for me to deploy to. And we just created the Evox UK one, so let's go and do that and say, well, okay, I'm just going to deploy to that service. That's now being deployed, so it'll go through that process, obviously. Shouldn't take too long. There we go. And so if I come back out of there, we'll see my staggering coding skills in action. So see, oh yes, of course, in my context. So I put this in my Java app simple servlet. There we go. So not wildly exciting, but I've deployed my servlet out into that application. So I can spin up an instance very easily. It's running in Azure, and I can use the tools that I might be happy with and familiar with, Eclipse. I can use the integration to just say I want to deploy that out into that environment. So that's to some extent looking at the platform I want to deploy to. So the other part I wanted to look at within this was how do we support, in this case, a Java developer through the development lifecycle, and that's where I wanted to talk about team services that I mentioned earlier. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to go to, or in fact, where you sign up for these if you're interested. If I go to visualstudio.com, it's probably the easiest way in. You'll see there's a Get Started for Free option. You can sign up for free for team services. You get a free account, and up to 5 people can use it for free. And then beyond that, licensing kicks in. There's a monthly subscriptions, or if you've got MSDN, things like that. So, but that's essentially how you can get into it. I'm going to go to, I've got an account, and I'm going to go to mine. When you create them, you'll end up with whatever your prefix is, so myname.visualstudio.com, or my.org, or whatever you choose to put in there. What you then get is an account provisioned in the cloud. So I've got my Visual Studio Team Services account. And then let's go and create a new project to show you sort of basic process there. Is I'm going to come in and say this is my Evox UK project, give it a description if you want to. Choose the approach you're going to take, essentially, what we refer to as a process template. So we provide Agile, CMMI, and a Scrum process template. I would default to the Scrum one. It's lightweight and is a pure implementation of Scrum, but you can choose whichever you want, and you can create your own versions of those as well. So you can inherit the process template, make customizations, things like that. So in this case, I can say we'll take Scrum, and then choose the primary version control mechanism that's going to sit behind this particular project. And so going back to my earlier comments, you can choose Git. It didn't have a name before until we added the addition of the support for Git, but we have Team Foundation version control, which is our centralized model, so more akin to sort of CVS version, clear casey kind of models, that kind of thing. You can have both in a project, so choosing one here doesn't invalidate the other option, but I'm going to choose Git, so I'll stick that in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and say create the project. Again, nervous presenter moment. This usually only takes about 10 seconds or so, somewhere around there, but we'll see whether it sounds that fast today. This is now provisioning that project for me. There we go, it's done. Nothing like a cheesy message to help you continue as well, so you're going to absolutely love this project, hopefully, we'll see. And when I go into that, I've got my new project created. You get some helpers, let's get rid of that for a second. So what I'm looking at is this is my dashboard, and I can create more. So this is information about the project. Obviously I haven't got things in there. So for example, at the moment, there's only me. I've created this, and I'm the only person in this project. So what I might want to do is come in here and say, I'd like to add in Colin, for example. So there's 2 of us on this project, so we'll add them in, and I can keep adding people into the project. So let's be collaborative about that. Depending on whether you're following something like Scrum or an initiative approach, as of yet, obviously we haven't set any dates. I can come in and say, what is our, we're going to work to something like, start today, and we're going to have a 2 or 3 week kind of sprint or iteration, whatever you want to call it. And I'll put those dates in. I won't do too many, but I can start to flesh out what does the structure look like inside our project. Key areas then, where am I going to start? Well, I might well want to start with something like the product backlog. So where I'm going to track things like requirements and bugs in one form or another. And so let me zoom in a little bit. Basically, because I've chosen the Scrum process template, I can choose between a product backlog item or a bug. So if I come in here and say I've got a product backlog item, or really probably a user story, oops, if I can type, that just creates a work item of that type. The work item has fields, so I'm going to go through them all, but things like state and importantly things like the effort, so story points, for example, business priority, and as we'll see as we go through, we can start to link our source control, so our commits back to work items, and get that contextual relationship going as well. So we can start to capture that information. I can cheat a little bit, which is not something you tend to want to do on normal projects, but we do have a widget in the dashboards for sample data. So if I just add that guy in, rather than you watch me typing, what I'm going to do is just say go and create me some sample data, and we'll get some stuff put in there. And what I want to show you then is that what we're seeing as an increasingly common way of working with projects is to use things like Kanban boards, even if not necessarily following, you may well be, but not necessarily having to follow Kanban to the letter, but actually visualizing the cards and using that kind of approach. So if I go back let's go back to the backlog, for example, we've got some more stuff in there because I've just had some random stuff generated. But if I switch to the board view, for example, then we've got this Kanban board. In fact, let's just maximize things for a moment. So we've got this Kanban board. This is becoming typically quite a focus for the team operations. And so what we can see here is a few things, is that we've got some columns, and these are things you can customize. So first of all, I could change them. So maybe I want this to be specify, implement, and let's go and have another column. And go into the columns and say I'd also like to have something like a test column. And you can set things like the work in progress limits and start to configure that. So you can look at the columns that we're using. And then for the cards themselves, well, you can see a couple of things here is that there's an amount of information, so you can choose what to display, whether you see IDs and various things like that. But we've also got colouring on here. So let's come in, let's show you how we can apply that and say I've got here's a nasty bug that I create. I can go into that, and perhaps the thing I want to set on this is to say that it's actually Severity 1. It's a very nasty bug indeed. Stuff, repro steps, etc. that I can put in here. So I can set that up and put it into this. In fact, let's go and assign this to me perhaps as well. So I'll pick me out. So we can see that. And there's a couple of things I might want to do. Well, first of all, I might want to have a swim lane, and that's going to be something like expedite. And these are things that we're going to perhaps expedite without following the rest of the routine. So what I'm going to do here is say, let's go and take this guy and stick it into expedite. What I'd also like to do is I'd like things like Severity 1 bugs to really pop out at me. And so I'm going to go back in and set up a rule, and I'm going to set some styles, and I'm going to create a Sev1 bug style. And what that allows me to do is say, well, let's change it to, it's got to be something like a red, doesn't it? Something like that. Don't want to make it bold, all that kind of thing. But all I want to do here is set some rules that triggers this. So I'm going to choose severity and an operator, and in this case, the value is 1. So we'll set that. So now that will colour those cards according to whatever rules I set up. So I can start to work with this. And then what we're increasingly seeing is this, as I said, as sort of focal point. So maybe I want to start thinking about the tasks that are involved, which is, okay, a bit contrived this one, but understand the problem. Fix the problem, etc. So whatever's actually involved in working on this, and that's creating child tasks that are linked to that top level bug in this example, and these have their own descriptors and information that you can use within that. So we can start to track those, and I can, maybe as I move this across to here, I'm going to say that we've done that one, and so I can track those and see that one of those tasks has been completed and so on. We can also associate tests with them, so I can come in and say we've actually got test A, test B, etc. I can have those things in there, and that creates a test case that I can associate with that card as well. So you can start to build up that information. But what you can also do, and I'll show you this flow in a second, is you can go through and create a new branch based off of that card. So maybe a feature branch, something like that, and associate that with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually the other thing I want to show you briefly here is if I go to the code area, quite rightly it's saying that it's empty because I did say use Git, but I haven't done anything yet. I haven't created any code. So just to show you again in terms of what we want to try and support, we've got the Code Explorer. We've got what is effectively a remote repo, but there are no locals yet, which is called Evox UK. I can create new repositories and manage them and put policies and things around them. But you can see that we give you a number of hints and helpful suggestions, if you like, around how can I clone this then into a number of tools. So how can I work with that? How do I direct URLs and URIs and credentials? How do I work with particular tools or just the command line instructions to allow me to just go into the command line and clone or set this up as a remote? So there's a whole range of options to connect that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly switch to another one which has got that servlet we're looking at, so not a lot. But this other project which I created earlier, very similar, but the only difference is this has already got some code in together with some history that I put in there. So this has had a number of commits and pushes from Eclipse, basically, that's in there. So what I wanted to show you quickly was to put the sort of end-to-end bits in there, is to say, well, okay, let's go back to basically the same point. Let's go to the board. And let's say I've got my bad bug there, and I'm going to create a new branch based on that. So that will then, I'm going to call this our bug branch, whatever you want to call it. It's associated with that card, so we've got that contextual information, and I'm going to create that branch. That creates a new branch in my Git repository on the server side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go at this point, and let's go and switch back to Eclipse and the Project Explorer. Don't know what's waiting there. You can do it. Oh, come on. So what I want to do is show you, yes, all right, ignore that then. I didn't think Eclipse was going to let me down today. Oh, that's the thing. Let's see where we get to. Give it a second. So what I want to show you is I want to go into just the Git repository explorer. Obviously, you could use any Git tools you want for this, but I'll use the Eclipse ones for this example, assuming it comes back to life. I want to show you, we're going to pick that branch up, we're going to make a change to it, and I want to commit and push that back in, and then take you through a pull request flow, and then that'll kick off the build, and in fact a deployment as well. So I want to take you through that, and now I'm getting impatient, so let's see if we can... Go back in. Sorry about that. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, that's fine. No, ignore, and OK. So what I'm, come on, far up. What I want to do here is say, OK, let's go back into our Project Explorer. Or in fact, let's go down to the Git repositories on this one, and say, here's my Java app. If I go and have a look at the branches, I can see on the, let's just do a, cool. Okay, we've got our bug branch there. So what I want to do is check that out. And we're going to check it out as a new local branch. I'll call it bug branch as well. So now we're working in that, and I'm going to say this is my bug branch servlet flow that's sitting in there. So all I want to do at this point then, I've made a simple change, is I'm going to come back in and say I'd like to commit that. Oops, let's go and commit that, and say this is fix the bug, and don't need to update that guy. And I'm going to commit and push. So I'll do it in one step at this point. Now what that's done is if I go back into our project and just refresh that, we'll see that because I've updated the bug branch, which is a branch of the master branch, it's suggesting I might want to create a pull request. So let's go ahead and create that pull request. I have the option to change the title, descriptions. I can go and have a look at the change in the text, or the change in the files. In this case, obviously, just one file, very simple. What's it related to that card, to fix the bug card? So let's go ahead and create the pull request. So see, come on. Oh, come on, demo gods, where are you with me today? Okay, that's fine then. Let's go and have a look at it. And so this is where you go through the pull request process. Obviously, standard best practice is to do your own pull requests, like I'm doing. So you may want to do something different to this, but let's say a team member helps you rather than me. But I can come in, I can go and have a look at those files, the commits. We actually do inline editing, or comments, sorry, not editing. So I can come in and say, that's a great fix kind of thing. And you can mention, so I can come in and mention me because I'm great and I'm reviewing this and all the rest of it. So I can stick that in, and that will then get overlaid into the discussion, but you can carry on having that discussion. Let's assume in this example, we can see there are no merge conflicts, it's showing at the top. I'm going to approve my changes because I'm like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and say complete the pull request. And then again, I can make changes to this, the comments. I can also choose to delete that branch, so maybe I want to tidy this up. We don't want that temporary branch hanging around. And I can also choose to squash in this case it won't make any difference, but if I'd made multiple local commits, maybe I want to compress that down to this is my bug fix comment, and just have that one bit of history. So I could do a squash as well. So we'll kick off the merge. So that's then merging into master. What we will see is that if I just flick over here very briefly, is I've got this is the cross-platform build agent, which actually this preview I'm using is actually .NET code running on Mac actually, as it happens. The previous one was Node. But if I go to our build area, what's happening is that I've kicked off an Ant-based build. So just missed it. There we go. Sorry, I was too slow. It's just run that build. And so we can see that's kicked off a continuous integration build. The way I created that was when you're in the build area, you can come in and say, I'd like to create a new build. And we've got a number of templates, and you can see, yes, there's Visual Studio and Windows 10, basically, Universal Windows Platform. There's also some others, Xcode, Xamarin, but also maybe I've got an Ant, Gradle, or Maven-based build. So let's go and use one of those existing build technologies effectively to build it and use that as the template. And then within the build definition, so mine's very simple. It's just the Ant steps, copying, kick off, call the Ant build file, and then go and do some copying and publishing around. But you can choose your triggers, and you can also add in additional steps. And we've got all of these steps are published up onto GitHub, and you can add your own as well. And that's the reason we really publish them there, is that you can use them as reference examples. There are utility steps. So if I'm on Windows, I might want to use PowerShell. Or if I'm on Linux, a shell script, obviously in the future, shell script on both. But you can, if it's scriptable, you can add it in. You can include tests like JMeter, Selenium, those kind of things. You can do packaging. You can use all sorts of technologies and steps in there and build that up. And then what's happened after that is that I've also got we've got a release in progress. This is some continuous deployment. And what I've set up here, I've just put a single environment in for the moment, is actually I've disabled that step, so that's not running. But what I'm doing here is I'm actually saying, well, after continuous integration has taken place, I want continuous deployment on successful running of that continuous integration. And so, and what I mean by that is go to the dev environment in this example, and then what I've chosen to do here actually is to use something called an Azure Resource Manager template, which is a JSON file, and that describes the environment I want to deploy to. And so what I'm saying here, I've just made this a little bit bigger, is use Azure Resource Manager. And I'm going to, and I've got a choice. In this case, I've chosen create or update the resource group. And I'm saying, go and create actually one of these Tomcat services for my development environment in Azure. If there's one, if I've already done this before and I've called it GDavi Java app, just reuse it. If it doesn't exist, create it. So I can wipe out these environments. They're disposable, and then when I run this step again, it'll get created. So that might more typically be something like a test environment. Actually just provision the test environment when I need it, use it, get rid of it afterwards. And so we can take advantage of the cloud to use that. And then having done that, just go and deploy this out. And I've done things like use parameters for things like the website name. But what we could also do here, if we're going to extend that, is say, well, I'd like to clone this. And after we go to the dev environment, I want a, let's have me. I'm going to approve this going to the next step, and that might be something like QA. So we'll have a QA step, which is now set up with me as an approver, but it can be much more sophisticated than that. And you can say that this will kick off after the dev environment has been run. So you can start to build up multiple environments and say, well, actually, I'd like to go to dev, then to QA, that will maybe to multiple QAs, QA 1, 2, 3, then it goes to UAT or pre-prod, prod, and this one can go there from here and set up all those kind of rules. So what I wanted to briefly show you there was that hopefully you can see just a very simple example is use the tools you want to, in this case Eclipse, but it could have been IntelliJ or something else. We can also provide those back-end support to say, yeah, we can give you private Git repositories, we can help you track your work, you can have CI, you can have continuous deployment. For any of these, you can also pick and choose. If you want to carry on using Jenkins or you want to use Chef, things like that, absolutely, that will plug in as well. And my parting point, I just want to quickly mention, is we have a program called Visual Studio Dev Essentials. It's free. You can get hold of things like team services anyway, but if you sign up for this for free, you'll get a 3-month Pluralsight subscription. You'll get Parallels for Mac, actually, for 3 months as well. You'll get $25 per month Azure credit. So basically you'll have access to all of these capabilities, to the learning, and to some of those resources in the cloud. You can sign up at ak.ms Dev Essentials. My parting points, I'm out of time, so I'll happily stop for questions and things, but my parting shot before that, we've got these natty Java T-shirts. If you want one of those, they're at our stand. I'll be at the stand all day as well. So if you want one of those, come by and we'll give you those. I love these. I didn't know anyone needed such a thing, but Visual Studio socks as well are also available on the stand. And then actually I've got a whole bunch of, if you want one of these Java Visual Studio stickers, actually I've just got a whole bunch here as well. There's more on the stand as well, so come grab one of those. But subject to me being kicked out of the room, I'm very happy to, I'll stop, but I'm very happy to take questions if there are any. So I hope that was some interest, but over to you guys. Are there any questions for me at this point? No? Cool. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I hope that was useful. Cheers.